Alrighty, Ronnie. Welcome back to another thrilling installment of Free Read Fridays. Now moving on to Volume 2 of Free Read Fridays. Um, I may tweak these and have like each playlist be like, I don't know, up until this Volume 2 be like divvied up into like groups of 50 so that people don't have to scroll for 50 years trying to find something in one of the big playlists. Because I've got everything in those, including the short story stuff. Maybe I should have like a one that's just miscellany and not the volumes themselves. I don't know. I'm not really sure of the best way to proceed for that. If anybody has any ideas for a useful organizational schema for the playlists, as they are getting to be quite a few, please feel free to leave a comment. Alrighty, so previously on, we had the extremely emotionally impactful um, Scholar's Tale. The taste of the river Lethe is bitter, or something along those lines. Something like that. The river Lethe's taste is bitter. I'm pretty sure it's pronounced Lethe. Um, in the proper Greek, it probably is not, but every example I could find of its pronunciation indicated that that was roughly the way to go. Lethe. Yes, I do occasionally look up pronunciation if I remember it's there, or have to remember back to a pronunciation when I was first reading and was like, what even is that word? You'd be surprised how often I do that. Um, I am unafraid to admit that there's stuff in, say, Gregg Egan. I mean, Gregg Egan. Gregg Egan's a whole nother can of worms. We're not going to even touch the Gregg Egan brain bending part. He at least will do some basic 101 explanation, usually, of what's going on, and he'll have that on his website. He's actually quite good about those. Um, he, I don't even know if Gregg Egan is a man. I have no way of knowing. I'm not sure if the world knows. Gregg Egan knows. I don't know if that's a pseudonym or not. Gregg Egan says that they do not have a picture of them that is labeled Gregg Egan on the internet. So, who knows? Good for them. That's tough to do nowadays. But Peter Watts, I had to look stuff up for Peter Watts all the time, constantly. Don't feel afraid to not know things, as long as you try to find out what those things are. In my opinion, of course, it's my opinion, and that's probably perceived as a political stance too. I don't know. It's gotten wild out there, folks. Real wild. Who ever thought that we'd see the return of the Know Nothings, right? I know. I know. I know. Now that is a charged statement. If y'all know any American history, circa mid-late 1800s, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't, well, I have nothing to add. That reminds me, I do. There's actually this great. It's not really a biography per se, but it's kind of a historical retrospective on a guy called John Fremont and his wife. That's actually quite fascinating. Um, called Uncertain Union, I believe it is. Unstable Union, something Union. I have it. It's on the shelf. I can see it from here. I just can't read it. It's too far away. Um, it's very good. I highly recommend it. It's both engaging and informative. John Fremont, the man who could have been president. In fact, his presidential run. That's spoilers. That's spoilers for historical fact. Whatever. Anyway, so previously on, so we learned what the deal is with Sol Weintraub carrying around a baby all the time. It's his like 30 or 40 now year old daughter, um, or 50-year-old daughter, I guess. If she was like 25 or 26 or something, I guess she'd be 50 by our perception of linear time. So she was an archaeologist. She went to the time. She went to the time tombs and the Sphinx, and then something happened, and then she started aging backward. What? I know. Uh, yes, all the way backward. She's now an infant and getting younger by the day. She has literally days to exist. It's it's not good. So like this entire time, it's like, oh, we're just having a fun little adventure. No, there's a friggin' clock. There's a clock. We are under the gun. You know? So it that story takes the recontextualizes absolutely everything that you thought you understood about the basic status quo of what was happening here. In terms of, oh, okay, well, yeah, we're under the gun because there's an ouster invasion, and now it's like, no, 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 you're really, like this baby's toast if y'all don't hustle. Um, recontextualization recontextualization wise, that has nothing on what we're about to hit. So uh, this interlude is the calm before the storm, and it is stormy. I think. Pretty sure this is the one where things get moving for our characters. Yes, yes, this is where it kicks in. We still have some character stuff to go. Plenty of those. And then, oh wait, no, that's not far enough. There we go. And then we get started on book two, which is the Fall of Hyperion. The real deal. Come on. If I could flip pages good, that'd be nice. Thank you. Thank you. But yeah, the short story after, or the tale after this interlude is going to be kind of the wait, what? What's going on? That's what's been happening. This what? It's pretty major, and it is not the end of the revelations. We have more. It's funny. The last character tale is one of the more subdued, even though it's got a lot going on. And then we get into, the Fall of Hyperion, which is just a ride, a big ride. Alrighty, so let me get some fluid in, on, and around my mouth and throat region, and we'll get cracking away at this very short interlude. It's only like 10, 12 pages, so this is going to be like maybe an hour. I know, sometimes I'm nice. Sometimes I make it easy. Sometimes I don't challenge your attention span. Other times, you're probably sitting here right now wondering, when is he going to shut up and start reading? Well, right now. Oh, the cover that I'm using here is one of the Japanese covers. If you hadn't guessed, the Japanese covers to the Hyperion books are almost universally almost universally phenomenal. They're all great. I wish I knew the artist. They're great. Chapter 5. Sunrise over the sea of grass was a thing of beauty. The consul watched from the highest point on the aft deck. After his watch he had tried to sleep, given it up, and come up onto the deck to watch the night fade into day. The storm front had covered the sky with low clouds, and the rising sun lit the world with a brilliant gold reflected from above and below. The Windwagon's sails and lines and weathered planks glowed in the brief benediction of light in the few minutes before the sun was blocked by the ceiling of clouds, and color flowed out of the world once again. The wind which followed this curtain closing was chill, as if it had blown down from the snowy peaks of the Bridle Range, just visible as a dark blur on the northeastern horizon. Braun Lamia and Martin Silenus joined the consul on the aft deck, each nursing a cup of coffee from the galley. The wind whipped and tugged at the rigging. Braun Lamia's thick mass of curls fluttered around her face like a dark nimbus. "Morning," muttered Silenus, squinting out over his coffee cup at the wind-rippled sea of grass. "Good morning," replied the consul, amazed at how alert and refreshed he felt for not having slept at all the night before. "We have a headwind, but the wagon still seems to be making decent time. We'll definitely be to the mountains before nightfall." commented Silenus, and buried his nose in the coffee cup. "I didn't sleep at all last night," said Braun Lamia, "just for thinking about M. Weintraub's story." "I don't think," began the poet, and then broke off as Weintraub came onto deck, his baby peering over the lip of an infant carrier slung on his chest. "Good morning, everyone," said Weintraub, looking around and taking a deep breath. Brisk, isn't it?" "Fucking freezing," said Silenus. "North of the mountains it'll be even worse." "I think I'll go down to get a jacket," said Lamia, but before she could move there came a single shrill cry from the deck below. "Blood!" There was, indeed, blood everywhere. Het Mastine's cabin was strangely neat. Bed unslept in, travel trunk and other boxes stacked precisely in one corner, robe folded over a chair, except for the blood which covered great sections of the deck, bulkhead, and overhead. The 6 pilgrims crowded just inside the entrance, reluctant to go farther in. "I was passing on my way to the upper deck," said Father Hoyt, his voice a strange monotone. "The door was slightly ajar. I caught a glimpse of the blood on the wall." "Is it blood?" demanded Martin Silenus. Braun Lamia stepped into the room, ran a hand through a thick smear on the bulkhead, and raised her fingers to her lips. "It's blood." She looked around, walked to the wardrobe, looked briefly among the empty shelves and hangers, and then went to the small porthole. It was latched and bolted from the inside. Lenar Hoyt looked more ill than usual, and staggered into a chair. "Is he dead, then?" "We don't know a damn thing, except that Captain Mastine isn't in his room, and a lot of blood is," said Lamia. She wiped her hand on her pant leg. "The thing to do now is search the ship thoroughly." "Precisely," said Colonel Cassad. "And if we do not find the captain?" "And if we do not find the captain?" Braun Lamia opened the porthole. Fresh air dissipated the slaughterhouse smell of blood, and brought in the rumble of the wheel and the rustle of grass under the hull. "If we don't find Captain Mastine," she said, "then we assume that he either left the ship under his own will, or was taken off." "But the blood—" began Father Hoyt. "Doesn't prove anything," finished Cassad. "Lamy is correct. We don't know Mastine's blood type or genotype. Did anyone see or hear anything?" There was silence, except for negative grunts and the shaking of heads. Martin Silenus looked around. "Don't you people recognize the work of our friend the Shrike when you see it?" "We don't know that," snapped Lamia. "Maybe someone wanted us to think that it was the Shrike's doing." "That doesn't make sense," said Hoyt, still gasping for air. "Nonetheless," said Lamia, "we'll search in twos. Who has weapons besides myself?" "I do," said Colonel Cassad. "I have extras if needed." "No," said Hoyt. The poet shook his head. Saul Weintraub had returned to the corridor with his child. Now he looked in again. "I have nothing," he said. "No," said the consul. He had returned the death wand to Cassad when his shift ended 2 hours before first light. "All right," said Lamia. "The priest will come with me on the lower deck. Silenus, go with the colonel. Search the mid-deck. Weintraub, you and the consul check everything above. Look for anything out of the ordinary, any sign of struggle."
"One question,"
said Silenus. "What?"
"Who the hell elected you Queen of the Prom?"
"I'm a private investigator," said Lamia, leveling her gaze on the poet. Martin Silenus shrugged.
"Hoyt here is a priest of some forgotten religion. That doesn't mean we have to genuflect when he says mass."
"All right," sighed broad Lamia. "I'll give you a better reason." The woman moved so fast that the consul almost missed the action in a blink. 1 second she was standing by the open port, and in the next she was halfway across the stateroom, lifting Martin Silenus off the deck with one arm, her massive hand around the poet's thin neck. "How about," she said, "that you do the logical thing because it's the logical thing to do?" managed Martin Silenus. "Good!" said Lamia, without emotion, and dropped the poet to the deck. Silenus staggered a meter and almost sat on Father Hoyt. "Here," said Cassad, returning with 2 small neural stunners. He handed one to Saul Weintraub. "What do you have?" Cassad asked Lamia. The woman reached into a pocket of her loose tunic and produced an ancient pistol. Cassad looked at the relic for a moment and then nodded. "Stay with your partner," he said. "Don't shoot anything unless it's positively identified and unquestionably threatening."
"That describes the bitch I plan to shoot,"
said Silenus, still massaging his throat. Braun Lamia took a half step toward the poet. Fedman Cassad said, "Shut up. Let's get this over with." Silenus followed the colonel out of the stateroom. Saul Weintraub approached the consul, handing him the stunner.
"I don't want to hold this thing with Rachel. Shall we go up?"
The consul took the weapon and nodded. Oh, don't worry, I'm having a morning. Don't worry, Warren Steele. You're not very late. We only just started. It'll take you a lot less than 30 minutes to catch up. The wind wagon held no further sign of Templar Voice of the Tree, Het Mastine. After an hour of searching, the group met in the stateroom of the missing man. The blood there seemed darker and drier.
"Is there a chance that we missed something?" said Father Hoyt. "Secret passages? Hidden compartments?"
There's a chance, said Kassad, but I swept the ship with heat and motion sensors. If there's anything else on board larger than a mouse, I can't find it.
If you had these sensors, said Silenus, why the fuck did you have us crawling through bilge and byways for an hour?
Because the right equipment or apparel can hide a man from a heat and beat search.
So, in answer to my question, said Hoyt, pausing a second as a visible wave of pain passed through him, with the right equipment or apparel, Captain Mastine might be hiding in a secret compartment somewhere.
Possible, but improbable, said Braun Lamia. My guess is that he's no longer aboard.
The Shrike, said Martin Silenus in a disgusted tone.
It was not a question. Perhaps, said Lamia. Colonel, you and the consul were on watch through those 4 hours. Are you sure you heard and saw nothing? Both men nodded. The ship was quiet, said Kassad. I would have heard the struggle even before I went on watch.
And I didn't sleep after my watch, said the consul. My room shared a bulkhead with Mastine's. I heard nothing. Well, said Silenus, we've heard from the 2 men who were creeping around in the dark with weapons when the poor shit was killed. They say they're innocent. Next case.
If Mastine was killed, said Kassad, it was with no death warrant. No silent modern weapon I know throws that much blood around. There were no gunshots heard, no bullet holes found, so I presume M. Lamia's automatic pistol is not suspect. If this is Captain Mastine's blood, then I would guess an edged weapon was used.
The Shrike is an edged weapon, said Martin Silenus.
Lamia moved to the small stack of luggage. Debating isn't going to solve anything. Let's see if there's anything in Mastine's belongings. Father Hoyt raised a hesitant hand.
That's, well, private, isn't it? I don't think we have the right.
Braun Lamia crossed her arms. Look, Father, if Mastine's dead, it doesn't matter to him. If he's still alive, looking through this stuff might give us some idea where he was taken. Either way, we have to try to find a clue. Hoyt looked dubious, but nodded. In the end, there was little invasion of privacy. Mastine's first trunk held only a few changes of linen and a copy of Muir's Book of Life. The second bag held 100 separately wrapped seedlings, flash-dried and nestled in moist soil. Templars must plant at least 100 offspring of the eternal tree on whatever world they find, explained the consul. The shoots rarely take, but it's a ritual. Braun Lamia moved toward the large metal box which had sat at the bottom of the pile. Don't touch that, snapped the consul. Why not? It's a Mobius cube, responded Colonel Kassad for the consul. A carbon-carbon shell set around a zero-impedance containment field folded back on itself. So? Said Lamia. Mobius cubes seal artifacts and stuff in. They don't explode or anything. No, agreed the consul, but what they contain may explode. May already have exploded, for that matter. A cube that size could hold a kiloton nuclear explosion in check as long as it was boxed during the nanosecond of ignition, added Fedman Kassad. Lamia folded her arms and looked at the rain-streaked glass. Wait a minute, did I skip a page? Yes, I did. A cube that size could hold a kiloton nuclear explosion in check as long as it was boxed during the nanosecond of ignition, added Fedman Kassad. Lamia scowled at the trunk. And how do we know that something in there didn't kill Mastine? Kassad pointed to a faintly glowing green strip along the trunk's only seam. It's sealed. Once unsealed, the Mobius cube has to be reactivated at a place where containment fields can be generated. Whatever's in there didn't harm Captain Mastine. So there's no way to tell, mused Lamia. I have a good guess. said the consul. The others looked at him. Rachel began to cry, and Saul pulled a heating strip on a nursing pack. Remember, said the consul, at Edge yesterday when M. Mastine made a big deal out of the cube? He talked about it as if it were a secret weapon. A weapon? Said Lamia. Of course, Kassad said suddenly. An erg. Erg? Martin Silenus stared at the small crate. I thought ergs were those force field critters that Templars use on their tree ships. They are, said the consul. The things were found about 3 centuries ago, living on asteroids around Aldebaran. Bodies about as big as a cat's spine, mostly a piezoelectric nervous system sheathed in silicon gristle, but they feed on, and manipulate, force fields as large as those generated by small spin ships. So how do you get all that into such a tiny little box? Asked Silenus, staring at the Mobius cube. Mirrors? In a sense, said Kassad, the thing's field would be damped, neither starving nor feeding, rather like a cryogenic fugue for us. Plus, this must be a small one, a cub, so to speak. Lamia ran her hand along the metal sheath. Templars control these things? Communicate with them? Yes, said Kassad. No one is quite sure how. It's one of the Brotherhood's secrets. But Het Mastine must have been confident that the Erg would help him with the Shrike, finished Martin Silenus. The Templar thought that this energy imp would be his secret weapon when he faced the Lord of Pain. The poet laughed. Father Hoyt cleared his throat. The Church has accepted the hegemony's ruling that these creatures, ergs, are not sentient beings, and thus not candidates for salvation. Oh, they're sentient all right, Father, said the consul. They perceive things far better than we could ever imagine. But if you mean intelligent, self-aware, then you're dealing with something along the lines of a smart grasshopper. Are grasshoppers candidates for salvation? Hoyt said nothing. Braun Lamia said, Well, evidently Captain Mastine thought this thing was going to be his salvation. Something went wrong. She looked around at the blood-stained bulkheads and at the drying stains on the deck. Let's get out of here. The wind wagon tacked into increasingly strong winds as the storm approached from the northeast. Ragged banners of clouds raced white below. Wow, okay. Ragged banners of clouds raced white beneath the low, gray ceiling of Stormfront. Grasses whipped and bent under gusts of cold wind. Ripples of lightning illuminated the horizon and were followed by rolls of thunder sounding like warning shots across the wind wagon's bow. I don't know why I thought that was not a sentence break. The pilgrims watched in silence until the first icy raindrops drove them below to the large stateroom in the stern. This was in his robe pocket, said Braun Lamia, holding up a slip of paper with the number 5 on it. So Mastine would have told his story next, muttered the consul. Martin Silenus tilted his chair until his back touched the tall windows. Stormlight made his satyr's features appear slightly demonic. There's another possibility, he said. Perhaps someone who hasn't spoken yet held the 5th spot and killed the Templar to trade places. Lamia stared at the poet. That would have to be the consul of me, she said, her voice flat. Silenus shrugged. Braun Lamia pulled another piece of paper from her tunic. I have number 6. What would I have achieved? I go next anyway. Then perhaps it's what Mastine would have said that needed to be silenced, said the poet. He shrugged again. Personally, I think the Shrike has begun harvesting us. Why did we think that we'd be allowed to get to the tombs when the thing's been slaughtering people halfway from here to Keats?
This is different, said Saul Weintraub. This is the Shrike pilgrimage.
So?
In the silence that followed, the consul walked to the windows. Wind-driven torrents of rain obscured the sea and rattled the leaded panes. The wagon creaked and leaned heavily to starboard. The wagon creaked and leaned heavily to starboard as it began another leg of its tack.
Lamia, asked Colonel Cassad, do you want to tell your story now?
Lamia folded her arms and looked at the rain-streaked glass. No, let's wait until we get off this damned ship. It stinks of death. The wind wagon reached the port of Pilgrim's Rest in mid-afternoon, but the storm and tired light made it feel like late evening to the weary passengers. The consul had expected representatives from the Shrike Temple to meet them here at the beginning of the penultimate stage of their journey, but Pilgrim's Rest appeared to the consul to be as empty as Edge had been. The approach to the foothills and the first sight of the bridle range was as exciting as any landfall, and brought all six of the would-be pilgrims on deck, despite the cold rain which continued to fall. The foothills were sere and sensuous, their brown curves and sudden upthrustings contrasting strongly with the verdant monochrome of the sea of grass. The 9,000-meter peaks the 9,000-meter peaks beyond were only hinted at by gray and white plains, soon intersected by low clouds, but even so truncated were wow. So this is actually there's some interesting word stuff he's doing here in terms of rhythm, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a meter happening, and I'm just too dense to catch it. So let me take this paragraph from the top as he waxes prosaic. Dan Simmons is quite good at the prose thing, by the way. Oh, yeah, I'll talk about that later. I'll talk about something later anyway. The approach to the foothills and the first sight of the bridle range was as exciting as any landfall, and brought all six of the would-be pilgrims on deck, despite the cold rain which continued to fall. The foothills were sere and sensuous, their brown curves and sudden upthrustings contrasting strongly with the verdant monochrome of the sea of grass. The 9,000-meter peaks beyond were only hinted at by gray and white plains, soon intersected by low clouds, but even so truncated were powerful to behold. The snow line came down to a point just above the collection of burned-out hovels and cheap hotels which had been Pilgrim's Rest. There we go. Nailed it, finally. It's a nicely written paragraph. Using intelligent English. So I had to actually turn my brain on for that. I could not autopilot it. I'm sorry. If they destroyed the tramway, we're finished, muttered the consul. The thought of it, forbidden until now, made his stomach turn over. I see the first 5 towers, said Colonel Cassad, using his powered glasses. They seem intact. Any sign of a car? No. Wait, yes. There's one in the gate at the station platform. Any moving? Asked Martin Silenus, who obviously understood how desperate their situation would be if the tramway was not intact. No. The consul shook his head. Even in the worst weather, with no passengers, the cars had been kept moving to keep the great cables flexed and free of ice. The 6 of them had their luggage on deck even before the wind wagon reefed its sails and extended a gangplank.
Each now wore a heavy coat against the elements, Cassad in force-issue thermoflage cape, Braun Lamia in a long garment called a trench coat for reasons long forgotten, Martin Silenus in thick furs which rippled now sable, now gray with the vagaries of wind, Father Hoyt in long black which made him more of a scarecrow figure than ever, Saul Weintraub in a thick goose-down jacket which covered him and the child, and the consul in the thinning but serviceable greatcoat his wife had given him some decades before. "What about Captain Mastine's things?" asked Saul, as they stood at the head of the gangplank. Cassad had gone ahead to reconnoiter the village. "I brought them up," said Lamia. "We'll take them with us." "It doesn't seem right, somehow," said Father Hoyt. "Just going on, I mean. There should be some service, some recognition that a man has died." "May have died," reminded Lamia, easily lifting a 40-kilo backpack with one hand. Hoyt looked incredulous. "Do you really believe that M. Mastine might be alive?" "No," said Lamia. Snowflakes settled on her black hair. Cassad waved to them from the end of the dock, and they carried their luggage off the silent windwagon. No one looked back. "Empty?" called Lamia as they approached the colonel. The tall man's cloak was still fading from its gray and black chameleon mode. "Empty. Bodies?" "No," said Cassad. He turned towards Saul and the consul. "Did you get the things from the galley?" Both men nodded. "What things?" asked Silenus. "A week's worth of food," said Cassad, turning to look up the hill toward the tramway station. For the first time, the consul noticed the long assault weapon in the crook of the colonel's arm, barely visible under the cloak. "We're not sure if there are any provisions beyond this point." "Will we be alive a week from now?" thought the consul. He said nothing. They ferried the gear to the station in 2 trips. Wind whistled through the open windows and shattered domes of the dark buildings. On the second trip, the consul carried one end of Mastine's Mobius cube, while Lenar Hoyt puffed and panted under the other end. "Why are we taking the Erg thing with us?" gasped Hoyt as they reached the base of the metal stairway leading to the station. Rust streaked and spotted the platform like orange lichen. "I don't know," said the consul, gasping for breath himself. From the terminal platform they could see far out over the sea of grass. The wind wagon sat where they had left it, sails reefed, a dark and lifeless thing. Snow squalls moved across the prairie and gave the illusion of whitecaps on the numberless stalks of high grass. "Get the material aboard," called Cassad. "I'll see if the running gear can be reset from the operator's cabin up there." "Isn't it automatic?" asked Martin Silenus, his small head almost lost in thick furs. "Like the wind wagon?" "I don't think so," said Cassad. "Go on, I'll see if I can get it started up." "What if it leaves without you?" called Lamia at the colonel's retreating back. "It won't." The interior of the tramcar was cold and bare except for metal benches in the forward compartment and a dozen rough bunks in the smaller rear area. The car was big, at least 8 meters long by 5 wide. The rear compartment was partitioned from the front cabin by a thin metal bulkhead with an opening but no door. A small commode took up a closet-sized corner of this aft compartment. Windows rising from waist height to the roofline lined the forward compartment. The pilgrims heaped their luggage in the center of the wide floor and stomped around, waved their arms, or otherwise worked to stay warm. Martin Silenus lay full length on one of the benches, with only his feet and the top of his head emerging from fur.
I forgot, he said. How the fuck do you turn on the heat in this thing?
The consul glanced at the dark lighting panels. It's electrical. It'll come on when the colonel gets us moving.
If the colonel gets us moving, said Silenus.
Saul Weintraub had changed Rachel's diaper. Now he bundled her up again in an infant's thermsuit and rocked her in his arms. Obviously, I've never been here before, he said. Both of you gentlemen have?
Yeah, said the poet.
No, said the consul, but I've seen pictures of the tramway. Cassad said he returned to Keats once this way, called Braun Lamia from the other room. I think, began Saul Weintraub, and was interrupted by a great grinding of gears and a wild lurch as the long car rocked sickeningly and then swung forward under the suddenly moving cable. Everyone rushed to the window on the platform side. Cassad had thrown his gear aboard before climbing the long ladder to the operator's cabin. Now he appeared in the cabin's doorway, slid down the long ladder, and ran toward the car. The car was already passing beyond the loading area of the platform.
He isn't going to make it,
whispered Father Hoyt. Cassad sprinted the last 10 meters with legs that looked impossibly long, a cartoon stick figure of a man. The tramcar slid out of the loading notch, swung free of the station. Space opened between the car and the station. It was 8 meters to the rocks below. The platform deck was streaked with ice. Cassad ran full speed ahead, even as the car pulled away. Come on! Screamed Braun Lamia. The others picked up the cry. The consul looked up at sheaths of ice cracking and dropping away from the cable as the tramcar moved up and forward. He looked back. There was too much space. Cassad could never make it. Fetman Cassad was moving at an incredible speed when he reached the edge of the platform. The consul was reminded for the second time of the old Earth jaguar he had seen in a Lucis zoo. He half expected to see the colonel's feet slip on a patch of ice, the long legs flying out horizontal, the man falling silently to the snowy boulders below. Instead, Cassad seemed to fly for an endless moment, long arms extended, cape flying out behind. He disappeared behind the car. There came a thud, followed by a long minute when no one spoke or moved. They were 40 meters high now, climbing toward the first tower. A second later, Cassad became visible at the corner of the car, pulling himself along a series of icy niches and handholds in the metal. Braun Lamia flung open the cabin door. 10 hands helped pull Cassad inside.
Thank God, said Father Hoyt.
The colonel took a deep breath and smiled grimly. There was a dead man's brake. I had to rig the lever with a sandbag. I didn't want to bring the car back for a second try. Martin Silenus pointed to the rapidly approaching support tower and the ceiling of clouds just beyond. The cable stretched upward into oblivion.
I guess we're crossing the mountains now, whether we want to or not.
How long to make the crossing? Asked Hoyt.
12 hours, a little less perhaps. Sometimes the operators would stop the cars if the wind rose too high or the ice got too bad.
We won't be stopping on this trip, said Cassad.
Unless the cable's breached somewhere, said the poet, or we hit a snag.
Shut up, said Lamia. Who's interested in heating some dinner? Look, said the consul. They moved to the forward windows. The tram rose 100 meters above the last brown curve of foothills. Kilometers below and behind, they caught a final glimpse of the station, the haunted hovels of Pilgrim's Rest, and the motionless wind wagon. Then snow and thick cloud enveloped them. The tramcar had no real cooking facilities, but the aft bulkhead offered a cold box and a microwave for reheating. Lamia and Weintraub combined various meats and vegetables from the Windwagon's galley to produce a passable stew. Martin Silenus had brought along wine bottles from both the Benares and the Windwagon, and he chose a Hyperion Burgundy to go with the stew. They were nearly finished with their dinner when the gloom pressing against the windows lightened, and then lifted altogether. The consul turned on his bench to see the sun suddenly reappear, filling the tramcar with a transcendent golden light. There was a collective sigh from the group. It had seemed that darkness had fallen hours before, but now, as they rose above a sea of clouds from which rose an island chain of mountains, they were treated to a brilliant sunset. Hyperion's sky had deepened from its daytime glaucous glare to the bottomless lapis lazuli. Lazuli. Oh gosh. Alliteration is fun. Hyperion's sky had deepened from its daytime glaucous glare to the bottomless lapis lazuli of evening, while a red gold sun ignited cloud towers and great summits of ice. I'm going to redo this paragraph. Hell with it. Sorry. Whenever he does these beautiful environment descriptions, they just throw me because he waxes prosaic, and I have a hard time. Because in order to live read this by sight, I'm like half to a full line ahead, and I'm letting my mouth do automatically, and my brain is filling in blanks. And you can't do that here. You can't do that here. Some authors you can get away with that for. You can't do that here. Okay, sorry. Yes, let's trip and fumble the end again. There was a you know what, I'll do the little mini paragraph above it. They were nearly finished with their dinner when the gloom pressing against the windows lightened and then lifted altogether. The consul turned on his bench to see the sun suddenly reappear, filling the tramcar with a transcendent golden light. There was a collective sigh from the group. It had seemed that darkness had fallen hours before, but now, as they rose above a sea of clouds from which rose an island chain of mountains, they were treated to a brilliant sunset. Hyperion's sky had deepened from its daytime glaucous glare to the bottomless lapis lazuli of evening, while a red gold sun ignited cloud towers and great summits of ice and rock. The consul looked around. His fellow pilgrims, who had seemed gray and small in the dim light of half a minute earlier, now glowed in the gold of sunset. Martin Silenus raised a glass. "That's better, by God." The consul looked up at their line of travel, the massive cable dwindling to thread-like thinness far ahead, and then to nothing at all. On a summit several kilometers beyond, gold light glinted on the next support tower. 192 pylons, said Silenus in a sing-song tour guide's bored tones. Oh, sorry. 192 pylons, said Silenus in a sing-song tour guide's bored tones. Each pylon is constructed of duralloy and whiskered carbon and stands 83 meters high. We must be high, said Braun Lamia in a low voice. The high point of the 96-kilometer tramcar voyage lies above the summit of Mount Dryden, the fifth highest peak in the Bridle Range, at 9,246 meters, droned on Martin Silenus. Colonel Cassad looked around. The cabin's pressurized. I felt the changeover some time ago. Look, said Braun Lamia. The sun had been resting on the horizon line of clouds for a long moment. Now it dipped below, seemingly igniting the depths of storm cloud from beneath and casting a panoply of colors along the entire western edge of the world. Snow cornices and glaze ice still glowed along the western side of the peaks, which rose a kilometer or more above the rising tramcar. A few brighter stars appeared in the deepening dome of sky. The consul turned to Braun Lamia. Why don't you tell your story now, M. Lamia? We'll want to sleep later before arriving at the keep. Lamia sipped the last of her wine. Does everyone want to hear it now? Heads nodded in the roseate twilight. Martin Silenus shrugged. All right, said Braun Lamia. She set down her empty glass, pulled her feet up on the bench so that her elbows rested on her knees, and began her tale. And that's where we're going to call it for today, because the detective's tale is long. It is so long that I would ideally split it in half. But it looks like we're not going to do that, because we have eyes bigger than our stomach. Or throat. Anyway, it's like 75 pages. And I am trying to find the end of it. There it is. There it is. Okay. That is going to be a doozy. Where's my other bookmark that I just dropped somewhere? Let me put that in here so that I have some eyeball of how long that is. Come on. There we go. There we go. The last one, though, the last bit, I will not need to do an interlude for, and will include the epilogue. It is rather more manageable, clocking in at, including the epilogue, like just over 60 pages. So brace y'all-selves for a particularly long one this coming Wednesday. Assuming I am able to do it Wednesday and I don't have to shift it to Friday for some bizarre reason. So next week we'll be done with Hyperion, and then we'll move right on to the Fall of Hyperion, which is the immediate follow-up. It happens. It's exactly coincident. It's a direct sequel. That's the word I'm looking for, and my brain isn't accessing my language centers particularly well at this moment. Sorry. Yeah. So somebody had asked either last stream or a couple streams ago, and possibly before then, if I would do Ilium by Dan Simmons, and I said, sure, I just have to get a chance to read it. Well, my copy is on order. It is coming in. So I'll get a chance to read that at some point in the next year, and at that point, I guess we'll figure it out. I don't know when we'll get to reading that one, and its sequel, Olympos. My understanding, based on my grasp of the description of Ilium / Olympos, is that it's actually not too dissimilar from Hyperion and Endymion in its way. Something, 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 genetically enhanced people, something, 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 gods, something, 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 poetry, something, something. So the good stuff that Dan Simmons brings to the table, among others. Before I do that, I will do Carrion, what is it, Carrion Comfort? Because somebody had asked me for that. Maybe we'll start that by the end of the year, maybe not. I'm still sort of coin tossing at the moment whether or not I'm going to pound out all of the Three Body Problem trilogy and the Destination Void series. I don't know. And I am not going to start the Three Body Problem by reading Ball Lightning. Sorry. They are technically tied in. They are technically in the same universe. Technically, Ball Lightning comes before the Three Body Problem, sort of. It actually comes in the middle. kind of the way three body problem is structured, it'll make more sense. But it's so loose. There's a couple references to the book in the three body problem, and I want to say the immediate sequel has a reference, but it's like those are covered in the footnotes, and there are quite a lot of footnotes. I'm rereading it right now, so I will be reading footnotes as they happen, and they will help at least a bit. Certainly, at least with the historical context that's going on, because a big chunk of the book takes place in, on, and around, and immediately after the Cultural Revolution. So things are, which should give you some frame of reference. The footnotes will give some frame of reference. I really am having a hard time with language today. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, it's all happening in my head, I swear. I'm just not expressing myself very well. That's why I read books, so they can do the expressing for me. Yeah? Yeah. Yeah? Yeah. I'm not a creative type. I've been over this. So yeah, Ilium and Olympos will happen. Carrion Comfort will happen at some point. Actually, the Destination Void isn't the book somebody asked me to read from that series. I think it was the Jesus Incident. Or was it Lazarus Rising? Lazarus Effect, sorry. I think it was the Jesus Incident. I don't think it's Jesus Incident. I think it's Jesus. You know, I'm not sure off the top of my head. It's been a while since I've read that one. Anyway, that's my post-stream blather, more or less concluded because I don't really have anything to harp on. As always, if you've got any requests, suggestions, or feedback, or whatever, or just want to say hi, be it positive or negative, just chuck something in the comments. I don't care. I'll read them. I read them when I see them, which isn't necessarily the day of. I don't really have social media stuff. I don't do that. So technically, I have social media accounts spread around, but I've lost the logins to some of them, and I don't care to get them back because my life is better without them anyway. Yeah, that's it. I think that's it. Yep. Once we move on to the Fall of Hyperion, I'll probably just be doing Hyperion streams once a week on Fridays. And so Wednesdays will open up as I don't know. I'll take that as an opportunity to do some short story stuff. I've got a short story collection by Peter Watts I can do. There's other things. I might wind up fitting that in as the where I do the. It's true. I could do it concurrently, couldn't I? That way, I'm reading 3 separate books every single week. Oh yeah, that'll really confuse me because I'll have to keep track of character voices even harder then. Anyway, options abound. Oh, thank you, Derpy Shark. Thanks for all the good reads, Frag. I have really enjoyed Hyperion so far. I'm glad. I enjoy it. I had gotten it in like a used bookstore. How long ago? I remember where I got it. I can see where it was perched. Because it was like in the middle of a pile of books in this rundown used bookstore. Oh geez, that would have been 20 something years ago now, I think. So I didn't read it when it came out at all. I didn't even know it existed, I don't think, which is a shame. I wish I'd read it sooner. But I would hesitate to say it. I don't know if I would say it changed my life, but it definitely. I was like, wow, this is really good. And then I didn't learn until like a decade later that, oh yeah, he wrote sequels to this. I was like, wait, what? And then I read the sequels. I'm like, whoa, dude, these are radical, brah. And they were indeed radical. I have misgivings about the way things turn out in the sequels, but not in a bad way per se. It's just kind of like, wait a minute, y'all's are okay with all this? Really? Everyone's okay with that? I don't know if I would be. Whereas Hyperion Hyperion ends. Hyperion feels like a reasonable ending place. The sequel does help, actually, though, because there's a bunch of stuff by the end of Hyperion, the Fall of Hyperion, rather, where you're just kind of like scratching your head, being like, so are we going to talk about any of these little things and how those are probably not really a resolved issue? And well, that's what Endymion is for. And I'm not going to start Endymion immediately because I'm going to need to recover. Fortunately, there's next to no recurring cast in it. Well, that's not true. There is some recurring cast. Um, kind of. I can't say more. I can't say more without spoiling things, so we're not going to. It takes place in the substantially distant future, but things will make sense later. He said as he crunches an ice cube very loudly. Yes, an ice cube in winter. Yes, I do roll that way. So yeah, nothing really new to be said here. Just the usual. Just the usual post-stream blather. Which includes, if you are tuning in for the first time, or listening to this on YouTube for the first time, I do these live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, starting about noon Eastern Standard Time, East Coast U.S. time, starting at about noon East Coast U.S. time, and on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And yeah, all of them are archived on YouTube. It is an ongoing effort to keep them organized in some way that's actually navigable. If people have suggestions for how they'd like them to be organized, if what's there doesn't work for them and doing it some other way would be better for them, please give me a holler, and I will endeavor. I will take it into consideration. Anyway, that's it for me. Stay safe, stay sane, and be decent to each other. See y'all next time.